everyone, welcome to today's episode of Wake the Future. Today we're going to be talking about what we call the AI mirror. Is AI a blessing in disguise? Is it reflecting back on us all of the things that frankly we were due for a reckoning over, all of the things that maybe we were blinded from, that we didn't see properly, and it's actually reflecting back a lot of the realities of the things that didn't work.
And what's really cool about this episode is that we talk a lot about AI. And I think that there are people out there who really talk a lot about what they perceive to be the benefits of AI, both now and down the road. But a lot of those things have to do with the efficiencies caused by AI, the innovative capacity, and all of that stuff. But what we're really talking about here is something that I don't think anybody else is really paying attention to, which is a long-term benefit, almost a side effect of AI. Not necessarily an intended consequence, but something which is going to come of this reckoning that we have as humans as we figure out our future alongside AI. And it's all about human identity.
Well, that's the thing, because everyone's talking about, oh, it's this time of change. And it's like, no, time out. It's not a time of change. And, you can say that this is more a change of times.
Right.
And it's also not a transformation, because we've talked about the fact that there are big transformations that have happened in the past. This time feels different.
Yeah.
This time is different. And you said it, it's this major reckoning of how we worked, what we've prioritized, even jobs and how we define jobs and labor and all of these metrics. It's like, are we finally starting to unbury ourselves from all of this jargon and all of these metrics and methodologies that didn't serve us? It's like this stew of ROI and KPIs.
Acronym soup.
And yes, acronym soup, where maybe if you want to talk about it as a blessing in disguise, the fact that we're finally taking a magnifying glass and it's just hovering over us collectively. And maybe we're starting to awaken to the fact that how we've almost been programmed to live and work and get paid and many facets of our economy, right? We can pay lip service to the fact that a lot of these things are broken, but now it's almost as if that AI mirror is forcing us in real time to be like, oh man, this was broken and it is time for a reckoning.
I mean, I completely agree with that. And you mentioned the word we've been programmed. And I think ultimately that's kind of where we're at. You think about where we are in the United States, where we are throughout much of the developed world. Some people on the political left refer to what's called late stage capitalism. And I don't want to get into that element of this right now. Late stage capitalism has become associated with a value judgment about the fact that, we have increased income inequality and uber wealthy people. We know this to be a problem. And they're basically like, capitalism is coming to its day of reckoning. But it's coming from a sense of political and social angst. I want to talk very pragmatically about economic realities right now. And that's what this episode is all about. We've talked in past episodes about things like the AI treadmill and about musical chairs and the fact that over time, and not over long periods of time, but in the very near future, it's already starting to happen. Significant percentages of people in the knowledge economy are going to be directly impacted by AI in the workplace. Many of them are going to lose their jobs. Some of them will lose their jobs very soon. Some of them will lose their jobs over the next 5 or 10 years. But at a certain point, there has to be this conversation. If those people lose their jobs, are there going to be enough new jobs created to reabsorb everyone in a conventional sense? And I think the answer is no. And in a previous episode, we talked about the fact that people like Elon Musk have said that in the future, there's going to be a future of abundance because of AI, and people won't need to work. And that sounds like a utopian vision. But the real question there is that actually practical? And does our economy have to change to meet it? And if our economy has to change to meet that moment, then how do people's entire identities about who they are, why they're here, and what their purpose is have to change on a collective basis for us to understand what we're doing?
So yes, all of that is true, but let's bring it down a little bit towards the individual level, because I think that there are a lot of things that have been conflated for way too long.
Yeah.
The first thing is that who we are and what we do for a living had kind of morphed into one. So we're just starting to realize what happens when these two strands are pulled apart, and then we're forced with the reckoning of, all right, maybe I'm not going to be able to fully define what I do for a living, and then that leaves who am I, what matters to me. One of the other things that has long been conflated is that busyness, kind of hustle culture, right? That always then meant all right, I'm killing it. Like, I'm busy, I have purpose, the hamster in a wheel effect. And now we're starting to see no, like new understandings of time, new understandings of productivity and efficiency. Two things that, of course, were due for a massive reckoning. And the fact that, again, who we are and what matters still, it's like it's still tied into very much an economic model. And I think we're just being forced, kind of like string cheese,
String
to
cheese.
to like pull each one of these layers
Yeah.
apart and look at it again through this AI mirror.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm going to speak about this kind of existentially for a second, and I think this transcends anyone's religious or spiritual beliefs. I firmly believe that we were not put on this earth, given this existence, to just be productive and efficient. And I think
You
that
don't think
when
we
you
were
think
put on this earth to be data analysts, or it's like Chandler Bing and Friends, where it's like, I am a data processor, and no one knew what he did for a living.
There, you've already taken it to the next level, which is what we do for a living. And where does that fit into this whole idea that is our purpose on this earth to be efficient and productive? This leads to a fundamental question, which is really at the heart of this whole episode. And I just want to ask this, because anyone watching this right now, do a serious audit of your life, of your work-life balance, of your identity and your purpose. Do you perceive yourself to be a human, or do you perceive yourself to be more of a worker bee or an ant in an ant colony? And of course, the reflexive response for anyone out there is going to be, I'm a human. Of course. I mean, what are you talking about, dude? Yeah. When in reality, if you
Unless
actually
we're like, I'm the queen bee.
Well, there are some queen bees out there.
I'm not a worker bee.
There's a real big concept here. Everyone reflexively is going to say they're human. But if you actually break it down and are objective about your day-to-day, how you spend your time, and you reflect, and you think about, am I spending 33% to 50% to 75% of my waking hours basically trying to earn an income? And in many cases, trying to generate revenue for a company or an organization that is run by somebody else? Am I basically just serving a function in a very, very specialized, highly evolved kind of ant colony? And I would argue that the majority of people actually are more like ants and worker bees than they are human beings, at least if you break them down to their core components. This needs to be completely blown up and rebuilt. Our entire sense of self has to be rebuilt. You and I have lost some people that we care about over the last several years. And when you see people towards the end of their life, you have to ask the question, do these people think for 1 second, I regret not hustling for an extra few minutes? Or I regret that I wasn't more productive in this or more efficient in that? People don't think that way when they're at the end of life, because all they take stock of is what really matters. The people they love, their families, their communities. But as we go through life, we completely lose track of that, and we fall into this trap of becoming worker bees and ants. So if you want to call that late stage capitalism, so be it. Whatever it is, the AI revolution is going to force a reckoning on us. And I think it's a reckoning that, while painful through the process, is going to lead to a new human renaissance. We just got back from a 2-week vacation in Italy, and we were in Florence, the seat of the Renaissance, and we were inspired to think about these sorts of issues and bring them forward to the current day. I think the Renaissance we saw there, or the Enlightenment or other periods like that, I think we're coming up to that as a civilization. We have to.
Well, I mean, the question is, was it due for a reckoning in and of itself, or was AI the impetus? Like, did it basically take something that was starting to unravel on its own anyway and just hit the accelerator? I frankly don't know anything about late stage capitalism, so I can't even speak to that. Even capitalism as it exists is very flawed in that we see income inequality. We see a lot of people kind of getting lost in the middle. There's a lot of political strife. There's so much polarization. There's just all of this shit in the cauldron. And yes, you could argue that like eventually we were going to have a massive recalibration, because human civilization as it currently exists cannot continue on this trajectory. Right. AI might have just been the accelerant in all of this.
I think it is. I think AI forced our hand. I mean, late stage capitalism, if I'm oversimplifying here, but basically if you think about Hunger Games, fictional worlds like the Hunger Games or Elysium and these kind of like dystopias. Yeah. That's what late stage capitalism is all about. It's basically the idea that you now have a handful of people who are increasingly approaching being trillionaires on this planet that have the same amount of wealth as a significant portion of the planet in aggregate. And honestly, no matter where you are politically, that's such BS. Yeah. It's so messed up. It is one of the worst things happening to humanity. But stripping out the politics of it, something like that's boiling over. The pot's boiling over. And AI is going to be what pushes us over the edge. And again, the irony of this is that this is not why AI was created. I mean, in part, people might say that AI was created to make things more efficient and lead us to an economy of abundance. But it wasn't created, at least intentionally, to make humans completely rethink their identities, their priorities, and why they're here. I think we're going to have to come to that reckoning, and I think we're just in the beginning stages of it. So,
and it's going to be very uncomfortable for a lot of people.
Absolutely.
And we get it. It's why, you and I were talking recently that it's even harder for us to say what it is that we do for a living. Yes, like traditionally, it's kind of the heuristic is that we're futurists, but we're chaos guides, we are speakers, we're thinkers. Like, I was just taking a walk with a good friend of mine. She's a doctor. Very clear what she does for a living. And she's like, all right, taking this walk is so nice. I was like, I try to do these every day because this for me is my thinking time. And so much of what I do is just think. You say that decades ago, and I would sound like I was out of my mind.
Right.
That a large portion of my time and my worth and income is based on thinking, right? And that's one of those other massive recalibrations. Valuing the art of thought.
Yeah.
As more people, again, in this AI mirror, have to come to terms with the fact that many facets of their jobs are going to go away. And it's not going to be easy for large swaths of the population to be like, I am an X, I am a Y, because so many of those positions, those titles, that talk about another thing that the AI mirror has exposed. All of those hierarchical, just the creation and the flooding of complete BS corporate titles that tell you nothing. Yeah. They make no sense. They prop you up to give you a sense of manufactured worth. But those are also starting to crumble. And we're going to have a whole generation of people, I think, whose jobs are going to be around just flexing that thinking muscle. And what that does to their sense of identity, that's going to be a massive shift. I think that it's going to be a welcome shift, but you've said before, it's like going through the birth canal. It's like it's going to be dark, it's going to feel long, but then when we come out the other end, and again, it's not like we're just going to magically come out to this other place in the future and then it's just going to be like utopia or dystopia. It's going to continue to be an evolution. It's going to force us to really come to terms with so many different facets of our humanity.
Yeah, I mean, and this has happened in spurts before. It happened with a lot of people who worked in the industrial sector, blue collar jobs. It's happened to a lot of people who work in entertainment, like in Hollywood, for example. There are elements of society, and look, historically it happened to people who were agricultural laborers, as soon as you had better machinery to be able to do things more efficiently. But now I think we're coming closer. Now that it's going to impact the knowledge economy, I think you're coming closer to a civilization level event. And when that happens, you have to have a mass awakening. Yeah. And here's the thing. If millions of people lose their jobs in the next few years without a viable replacement, at a certain point, there has to be a reckoning. It's that tipping point again. Right. So the situation is not sustainable. So it is a birth canal. We're going to go through a dark period. Not everyone is going to go through it with equal intensity, but we're going to go through a dark period and we're going to come out the other side, I think. Several years ago, it's probably now over a dozen years ago, we came across this group of people called post-workists. And I think you might remember this. And they were a fringe group and it was generally academics, like professorial kind of nerds. And they basically posited that humanity was due for a new renaissance, that we should be looking towards a future where we no longer need to work, because their philosophy was sort of what we're talking about. Why is everyone acting like a worker bee or an ant when we're humans and we are more highly evolved? And we, by the way, have a greater consciousness, which we've talked about in a previous episode. We should be doing greater, grander things. And some people might be doing those things right now, but generally speaking, we're conditioned to just be like cogs in a system. And they were saying that in the near future, there would be post-work and people would be freed to pursue creative passions and to be inventive in new areas. It sounds amazing, but at the time it seemed completely impractical and everyone thought it was ridiculous. Now I think we're actually moving towards a future where when you have some of the world's most prominent, wealthy people saying this is the way the future is going to be, we have to at least pay mind to it and talk about it. And again, let's get back to the bare bones of this. People who are promoting artificial intelligence as an innovative technology, as something that's going to change the world, they might be talking about it as a workplace efficiency. and even going as far as saying that it might make work optional. But they're not talking about how it might cause us to all rethink our identity collectively as human beings. And that to me is an unbelievably important topic.
Well, that's the biggest thing, because I also feel like, and whether I'm framing this correctly, I'm not sure, but that AI is almost a scapegoat, meaning all of this was due for a reckoning.
Yeah.
They all became bloated during COVID. The creation of these roles, redundancy, right? Like, so many people are not even needed in those
Half
positions.
of these roles were created since World War II. And you said it before. I don't mean to interrupt,
We've overemployed people.
I wanted to pick up on something you said earlier, and I failed to do it earlier. And you said busyness. And if you think about the word business, business is derivative. The word business, what everyone does, is derivative of busyness. And if you think about that, if you unpack that, it basically follows the principle that it's something to keep people busy. Yes, we need to earn an income in our current economic environment the way that we do, but it's ultimately to keep people busy. In fact, the number one concern that people put out there about a post-work environment is if people don't have an office to go into or a job to keep them productive, they're going to have restless energy and cause destruction. I don't necessarily agree with that. I don't think that I don't have this nihilistic view that humans necessarily are just going to become barbarians. But that's the thing. We're in a world of busyness. Yes. And that's what all these jobs are.
Most people are not needed in their roles because their roles are bullshit, right? And AI, I think, is an excuse for a lot of companies to have mass layoffs. AI isn't creating those layoffs. It's the fact that they became so big and bloated that, they're like, you know what? My bottom line is still important. I actually don't need these people. Oh, wait. I can say it's because of AI. We know that the majority of generative AI programs, because there's no long-term thinking when it comes to AI, they're just flatlining, right? A lot of companies don't know how to successfully implement any sort of AI internally. But yet, when they scale back and they trim their workforces, it's like, that's why I'm like, is it AI as a scapegoat? So the AI mirror is also not only reflecting back our own sense of identity, but it's also used as an excuse, I think, for a lot of corporate leaders to blame a lot of their problems on AI when they were just due for a reckoning in and of themselves.
Well, and you were saying, I love picking up on these little nuggets of yours, because you're saying, which is absolutely correct, that a lot of these jobs and a lot of these companies don't need people. And the flip side to that is equally important, which is that we have to learn as people that we don't need these jobs. So when you go up to somebody in today's world, in today's economy, and this is also a very American thing, you go up to someone and ask them, tell me about yourself. Who are you? Invariably, more than half the time, the majority of the time, people first respond with what they do for a job, what they do to earn a living. I'm a doctor, I'm an accountant, I'm a plumber, I'm a scientist.
You remember, I cut my teeth in DC for the first 2 years of my career, and that was the only basis of conversation.
Yeah, and you know, I've spent most of
also a very intense place to live.
I spent most of my life in New York, and the whole idea of what you do for work and how much income you earn, it's a perpetual pissing contest. And I had enough of it. Here's the thing. When you go up to someone and that's their reflexive first response, is not to tell you anything about who they actually are, but what they do, and they conflate the two, you know that you have an existential crisis, and it's been going on for a long time. We have to untangle ourselves from that. And I firmly believe that. And so again, if you stand on top of a skyscraper, okay, and I've actually done this. I've stood on top of, whether it's the Empire State Building or when we were in Kuala Lumpur and we were on the top of the Petronas Towers. You look down at the street and you watch people walking, you watch pedestrians, and you watch vehicle movement and traffic flow. It looks almost identical to when you're standing on a hardscape or on concrete and you're watching an ant colony. There is a very high level and of built-in level of collective intelligence that humans have. And I think it's something that we can't overlook. But if we reduce ourselves to just that collective, to just moving around and flowing like a colony of ants or worker bees, we are surrendering one of the key differentiators to our own humanity. And we talked about this in the consciousness episode, and it is the combination of agency and identity. And identity is the big piece here, the I of that. So I think we really just have to think about this differently as we go forward. We have to understand how to take stock of our own position. Like, is our job at threat? If so, we have to figure out in the near term how we can provide for ourselves, for our kids, because a lot of this has to do with families, But then ultimately, long term, how do I reinvent myself? And how do I reset the expectation for my children so that they understand they're going to be coming of age in a different environment? I mean, we have this conversation all the time. We have an 8-year-old. We bring him up on most of our episodes. It would have been unfathomable for us 10, 20 years ago to think that he would take a path other than what we did, which is graduate high school, go to college, get our degree, maybe an advanced degree, and go out there into the world. And the fact that you and I question that, not just because of the cost of college, but because we're like, what is the world he's stepping into? How should he be defining himself? The fact that there's even a 5% chance that we're thinking about something less conventional suggests that you and I are just taking our first step, dipping a toe into the water, which is what I think everyone is going to need to do. And I don't want to be prescriptive, but this is a civilization level event.
Oh, yeah. And I want to go back to the analogy of the mirror. And, you know, even when I say that, I think of Snow White, and it's like mirror, mirror on the wall. And what you see is reflected back at you. And in a lot of presentations, I always will show the same image, which is that of like an ink blot test, and basically say that this is what the future looks like. And there's only one real image to describe it because it's based on perception, right? It's like how we choose to view the future, our own reality, is how ultimately we will shape it for ourselves and our communities and our families. And I think a lot of this, when it comes to the AI mirror, is what we are actually putting into it in the first place. And a lot of it is about what it is reflecting back at us.
Yeah.
And to really start unlearning a lot of the things that we were taught, how we were taught to see the world, our jobs, our careers, our families, whatever it is.
So one of the reasons why I love this metaphor of an AI mirror is because we think of AI as a technology, as a tool, as a platform, as an innovation. But I think at its most basic terms, it's going to serve as a mirror for us as individual people and for humanity. And I think that this is a conversation that should just be starting with this episode. We want you to share this, amplify the conversation, because the reality is we need to start thinking this way.
So thank you for joining today's episode on the AI Mirror. As always, remember to like, follow, subscribe, and we'll see you next Tuesday for more. If you enjoyed today's conversation, like, follow, and subscribe to stay ahead of what's next. I'm Erica Orange.
And I'm Jared Weiner. Thanks for waking the future with us. We'll see you next time.